That isn't the target. Captain Ryan Cole stopped with one hand resting on the weathered M40 rifle and turned toward the old man standing beyond the yellow firing line marker. The noon heat pressed down on Black Ridge Range like a heavy sheet of glass. Nearly a mile away, a black steel silhouette shimmered above the pale desert floor, bending and stretching inside waves of rising air. Every scope on the line showed the same target. Every camera showed the same target. Yet Walter Mercer looked past it as though it were nothing more than a shadow on water. Ryan gave a dry laugh and lifted the rifle from the inspection table. It looked ancient beside the sleek precision weapons arranged under the canvas shelter. Its walnut stock had darkened with oil and age. The steel bore faint scratches that no polishing cloth could erase. A simple scope sat above the receiver, narrow and plain, without digital readouts, illuminated markings, or a cable leading to a ballistic computer. "This is what you brought onto my range?" Ryan asked. His voice carried easily across the concrete firing pad. Several young Marines turned from their spotting scopes. An old M40 with a scope older than half my instructor's. Walt did not answer at once. He was 79, tall despite the slight bend in his shoulders, with white hair cut close and a face marked by sun, wind, and years that had never asked permission before leaving their trace. He wore faded jeans, a clean work shirt, and a canvas jacket despite the heat. His pale blue eyes remained fixed on the distant valley. Ryan rotated the rifle in his hands, examining it with the detached impatience of a man inspecting damaged equipment. "The stock is warped. The glass is outdated. I'd be surprised if this thing can hold a group at 300 yards. A few restrained chuckles moved down the line. Walt finally looked at him. There was no anger in his expression. No embarrassment. Only a stillness that made the laughter feel louder than it was. "It holds where it needs to," he said. Ryan placed the M40 back on the table with a hard wooden knock. "Not here. Black Ridge is a certified long-range facility. We run modern optics, calibrated weather stations, and approved weapons systems. I'm not letting a museum piece onto an active firing line." Behind him, 3 digital monitors displayed wind speed, temperature, humidity, and constantly changing firing solutions. The numbers shifted every few seconds. None of them agreed. For almost 2 hours, Ryan's best shooters had sent round after round toward the distant steel. Every shot had missed to the right. Some by inches. Some by several feet. The target camera showed no obvious malfunction. The wind meters reported conflicting currents. The heat above the rocks twisted the view until the silhouette seemed to float free of the earth. Ryan had ordered new calculations, new spotters, and new equipment checks. Nothing had changed. Walt leaned slightly toward the valley. He watched the pale grass near the first ridge, then the dust curling along the dry wash below. Farther out, a hawk crossed the shimmering air and suddenly dipped as though it had flown into an invisible stream. "Your instruments are measuring the wind where they stand," Walt said. "The bullet won't stay where they stand." Ryan folded his arms. "And I suppose that rifle tells you what the computers can't." Walt's gaze returned to the wavering black shape. "No," he said quietly. "The air does." Ryan's expression tightened, not because Walt had raised his voice, but because he had not. The old man spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had already watched the mistake happen. Ryan turned toward the bank of monitors beneath the shade canopy. Numbers glowed in green and amber across the screens. The nearest weather station reported a crosswind from the west at 9 miles per hour. A second sensor, positioned near the middle ridge, showed 4 miles per hour from the southwest. The target station claimed almost no wind at all. Sergeant Caleb Morris, the senior range technician, tapped the display and frowned. "The sensors passed calibration this morning, Captain." Ryan gave him a sharp look. "Then run them again." Morris nodded and reached for the control panel. Down the firing line, 6 shooters waited behind rifles mounted on bipods. Their equipment represented the best the armory could provide. Adjustable stocks, high magnification optics, laser range finders, compact weather meters clipped to belts and packs. Each rifle had been checked twice. Each shooter had entered the same corrected distance. Still, the steel target remained untouched. Walt stepped closer to the yellow marker but did not cross it. His attention moved from the dry grass at 300 yards to a line of dark rocks beyond 800. The grass leaned east. Dust along the wash drifted north. Over the final ridge, the heat haze crawled almost straight upward. 3 separate movements. 3 different stories. A young Marine named Noah Bennett lowered his spotting scope and rubbed one eye. He was the newest assistant on the range, quiet enough to be overlooked and observant enough to notice when confidence became performance. "Captain," Noah said carefully, "the mirage is running left near the first ridge, but it shifts past the wash." Ryan did not turn. "The computers already account for thermal movement." "Yes, sir." Noah looked back through the glass. The black silhouette seemed to slide several inches, then snap into place, then stretch at the shoulders. "It just does not look stable." Ryan walked behind the nearest shooter and studied the ballistic tablet. "Add 1.2 minutes left. Reduce elevation by half a minute." The shooter adjusted the scope. The range went still. A flag cracked once in the heat, then sagged. "Send it," Ryan ordered. The rifle answered with a flat report. Everyone watched the distant screen. A small cloud of dust appeared beyond the target, well to the right. Ryan's jaw hardened. Walt did not smile. That absence of satisfaction made the miss feel worse. "You corrected for the wind you measured," Walt said. "Not the wind the bullet crossed." Ryan turned slowly. "You have been standing here for 10 minutes. Long enough. You think you can read a mile of air by looking at weeds and birds?" Walt glanced toward the hawk circling over the valley. "They live in it. Your machines only visit." A few Marines exchanged looks, but no one laughed this time. Ryan walked back to the inspection table and placed one hand on the old M40. "This range is not a place for stories, Mr. Mercer. Results matter here." Walt studied the warped image of the target, its edges dissolving in the glare. "Then stop aiming at what the heat wants you to see." Noah kept his eye to the spotting scope. The target wavered, narrowed, and seemed to drift sideways without moving at all. He adjusted the focus, but the image only became sharper in the wrong way, as though the glass were helping the heat create a better lie. "The right edge keeps separating from the post," he said. Ryan stepped beside him. "That is atmospheric distortion." "Yes, sir, but the post is not distorting at the same rate." Ryan looked through the scope for several seconds. The target appeared solid, then folded into a thin black ribbon, then returned. He straightened and glanced toward Walt. "What exactly do you think is happening?" Walt did not approach the equipment. He crouched near the yellow marker and picked up a pinch of pale dust. He let it fall from his fingers. The grains moved east for a few inches, dropped, then curled back toward the west. "The ground is heating unevenly," he said. "That ridge is throwing warm air across the wash. The wash is pulling cooler air through the low ground. Where they meet, the image shifts." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "A mirage does not move steel." "No," Walt replied. "It moves where the steel appears to be." Sergeant Morris stopped working at the control station and listened. The other Marines had grown quiet. Even the range flag seemed uncertain, snapping in different directions before falling limp again. Ryan pointed toward the distant silhouette. "The camera is mounted less than 20 feet from the target. It confirms the position." Walt looked toward the monitor. "The camera is looking through the same air." The word settled over the firing line. Noah studied the screen and then the valley. He noticed a bright line near the base of the target, a thin reflection that appeared and vanished with every pulse of heat. "There is something behind the berm," he said. Ryan turned. "There is nothing behind the berm. I see a second reflection, sir." Morris enlarged the camera image. The picture broke into squares, recovered, and showed the black silhouette trembling against the tan earth. For an instant, a darker shape appeared several feet to the left. Then it disappeared. Ryan leaned closer to the screen. Compression artifact. Walt stood slowly. Or another piece of steel catching sunlight. Ryan faced him. "You came here to deliver a rifle to the museum office. You are not on the range staff, and you are not part of this evaluation." "That is true." "Then stop undermining my people." Walt's gaze moved across the young shooters waiting behind their rifles. "I am trying to keep them from learning the wrong lesson." The remark struck harder than an insult. Ryan walked to the table and lifted the M40 again. Sunlight caught the scratches along its receiver. "And what lesson would this teach them?" he asked. "That old equipment becomes accurate when someone tells a good story." Walt's expression remained still, but Noah saw his eyes settle on a scorched mark near the rear of the stock. It was not a random stain. The wood around it had been darkened by heat and worn smooth by a hand passing over it thousands of times. Ryan noticed the mark too. He turned the rifle and pressed his thumb against it. "What happened here?" The sound of the range faded from Walt's face before it faded from the air. His shoulders did not move, yet something in him seemed to step backward across decades. The heat remained. The valley remained. But his eyes were no longer seeing Black Ridge. The dry heat of Black Ridge dissolved into another summer, another valley, and another sky bleached white by dust. Walt was 24 again, lying behind the same M40 on a slope of sun-baked stone. The rifle was newer then. Its walnut stock still held a clean shine beneath the dirt, and the metal had not yet gathered the scratches of a lifetime. Around him, the air trembled so violently that the distant ridgeline seemed to breathe. Nothing stayed where the eye placed it. Rocks stretched into shapes that were not there. Shadows floated above the ground. Even the horizon bent beneath the afternoon glare. A young lieutenant named Daniel Holloway rested several yards below him beside a radio pack, speaking in a low voice to men scattered across the hillside. Daniel was 27, fair-haired, steady, and far too calm for someone responsible for bringing everyone home. He looked toward Walt and raised 2 fingers. 2 minutes. That was all the time they had before the sun dropped behind the western ridge and erased the narrow route through the valley. Walt returned his attention to the scope. Somewhere beyond the heat shimmer, an observer was tracking their movement and reporting every position they took. Each time Daniel's group approached the open ground, a warning signal sounded from the opposite ridge, forcing them back into cover. No one could locate its source. The shifting air turned every dark patch into a possible figure and every flash of stone into a lens. Walt slowed his breathing. He ignored the largest movements and searched for the smallest. A line of ants crossing a flat rock changed direction near one patch of shade. Dust rose from the slope, but not from a narrow strip beneath an overhang. A desert bird landed, startled, and lifted again without touching the ground. The empty space below that overhang felt too still. Daniel crawled closer. "You see him?" he whispered. "I see where the heat stops behaving," Walt answered. Daniel looked through his field glasses and saw only rolling waves of light. "That is not much to aim at." "It is enough." A sudden glint appeared high on the ridge, bright and obvious. Daniel shifted his glasses toward it, but Walt did not follow. The flash was too clean. Too easy. A reflection placed where impatient eyes would find it. Walt kept the rifle trained on the quiet strip beneath the overhang. The heated air moved left. The darker air near the stone moved right. Between them was a narrow seam where the image broke apart. Daniel studied Walt's face. The eye can lie, he said. Walt gave the smallest nod. His finger settled against the trigger. Before he could complete the shot, a flare burst in the distance, signaling that their route had been spotted again. Daniel rose to redirect the group. The blackened metal casing from the flare landed against the M40's stock, scorching the wood near Walt's cheek. He did not move. He waited for the mirage to lean away from the stone, revealing nothing more than a sliver of unnatural shadow. Then the rifle spoke once. The warning signals across the valley stopped. The route remained quiet. Daniel looked back at Walt with relief, but no celebration passed between them. There was still work to do, and daylight was fading. The memory released him slowly. Black Ridge returned in layers, the electric hum of the monitors, the dry snap of the range flags, the weight of years in his shoulders. Ryan's thumb still rested on the scorched mark. Walt reached out and gently removed the captain's hand from the rifle. "Do not mistake a scar for damage," he said. Ryan stared at him, but Noah was looking at the stock. Beneath the dark burn, almost hidden by age and oil, two faint words had been carved into the wood: "The eye lies." Noah leaned closer to the rifle without touching it. The carved words were shallow, nearly erased by oil and time, but they were unmistakable. "The eye lies." Ryan read them too, and for the first time that morning, his confidence hesitated. "Who carved that?" he asked. Walt's hand rested lightly on the stock. "A man who learned the lesson too late." The range fell quiet around them. Even the Marines waiting behind their rifles seemed to understand that the old weapon was no longer an object of amusement. Ryan recovered first. He set his jaw and turned toward the firing line. "We are losing daylight. Reset the next shooter." Sergeant Morris hesitated. "Captain, the target camera is still showing image drift." "Then compensate for it." Morris looked toward Walt, then back to Ryan. "Yes, sir." Noah returned to his spotting scope, but the strange reflection behind the berm troubled him. It appeared again, lower this time, a brief silver wink beneath the rolling heat. He adjusted the magnification. The image softened. He reduced it. For a moment, the valley became clearer. Something moved behind the target line. Not the black silhouette. Something farther back. "Captain," Noah said, "I think there is movement beyond the berm." Ryan did not look up from the ballistic tablet. "The maintenance road is closed during live fire." "I know, sir. I still see something. Probably a heat shadow." Walt turned toward the far ridge. His posture changed almost imperceptibly. The stillness in him sharpened. He watched a patch of empty ground several yards left of the visible target. A pale flash appeared, vanished, then appeared again. Not sunlight on steel. Sunlight on glass. "Stop the line," Walt said. Ryan looked at him. "You do not give commands here. There is someone downrange." The words carried no drama, only certainty. Ryan stepped toward the monitor bank. The camera showed an empty service road, a silent berm, and the wavering target. "There is no one there." Walt pointed toward a section of air that looked completely vacant. "Maintenance truck. White roof. Two men beside it." Noah swept the scope left. At first he saw nothing but pale earth bending in the heat. Then a dark vertical shape formed and disappeared. A second later, he caught the outline of what might have been a shoulder. "I see it," he said. Ryan's voice hardened. "You see distortion." Sergeant Morris checked the range schedule. "No crews are authorized past checkpoint 3. "Then call checkpoint 3, Walt said. Ryan ignored him and motioned toward the next shooter. "Prepare to fire." The Marine settled behind his rifle, but his eyes moved uncertainly toward Noah. The range flag near the firing line snapped east. Farther out, dust slid west through the wash. The target seemed to move several inches to the right. Walt watched the narrow space behind it, where the heat folded the landscape into layers. A tiny orange flicker appeared close to the ground. A safety vest. Gone almost before the mind could name it. Walt stepped across the yellow marker. Ryan moved to block him. "Step back, Mr. Mercer. Call the ceasefire. There is no confirmed hazard." Walt met his eyes. The calm remained, but something heavier stood behind it now. "You are waiting for a screen to notice men standing in front of your bullets." Noah looked through the scope once more. The mirage shifted, and a white utility vehicle emerged for half a second before melting back into the glare. His hand moved before fear could stop it. He struck the red emergency switch. A siren tore across Black Ridge. Red lights began flashing above the firing line. Every shooter lifted away from his rifle. Ryan spun toward Noah, anger rising in his face, but beyond the target, the heat opened like a curtain. A white maintenance truck rolled slowly into view. The truck stopped 20 yards behind the berm, its white roof glaring beneath the sun. Two maintenance workers stepped out, both wearing orange safety vests that flashed through the heat like warning signals no machine had understood. For several seconds, no one on the firing line spoke. The emergency siren continued to pulse across the valley, harsh and mechanical, while every rifle remained pointed safely downrange. Ryan stared at the monitor. The road that had appeared empty now held a vehicle, 2 men, and a mistake that could not be explained away. Sergeant Morris grabbed the radio. "Black Ridge Control to maintenance vehicle, confirm your location." Static answered first. Then a confused voice came through. "We are behind target berm 4. Dispatch told us the range was cold for inspection." Morris looked at Ryan. The schedule change never reached them. Ryan's face lost its color. He glanced toward the shooter who had been seconds from firing, then toward Noah's hand still pressed against the emergency switch. "Keep the line cold," he ordered. His voice was lower now. All weapons cleared and flagged. The Marines moved immediately. Bolts opened. Chambers were checked. Bright safety flags appeared one by one. No one needed to be told twice. Walt stepped back behind the yellow marker. He did not claim victory. He did not look at Ryan with accusation. He simply watched the maintenance crew climb into the truck and begin the slow drive toward the service gate. That silence carried more weight than anger. Ryan approached Noah. "You broke the chain of command." Noah swallowed. "Yes, sir." "You activated an emergency ceasefire without confirmation." "Yes, sir." Ryan looked past him toward the white truck, now fully visible in the clear strip between 2 waves of heat. "You also prevented a live round from going downrange." Noah said nothing. Ryan turned toward Walt. "How did you see them?" Walt nodded toward the valley. The heat was moving. They were not. Ryan looked through the spotting scope again. The maintenance truck appeared, vanished, and returned as the air rolled over the ground. The camera missed them. The camera saw what the air allowed it to see. Morris removed his headset. "Range command has been notified. Colonel Holloway is on his way." At the name, Walt's eyes shifted toward him. It was the first clear reaction anyone had seen from the old man. Ryan noticed. "You know the colonel?" Walt looked back at the scarred M40. "I knew his brother." Noah glanced at the words carved into the stock. "The eye lies." Something connected in his memory. He had seen that phrase before, framed beneath an old photograph in the base heritage room. The picture showed a much younger Walt kneeling beside the same rifle, with Lieutenant Daniel Holloway standing behind him. Below it was a single call sign printed in faded type. Stillwater. Noah looked at Walt with sudden recognition, but the old man gave him the smallest shake of the head. "Not yet." Dust rose beyond the access road as a black command vehicle approached the range. Ryan watched it come, then looked down at the M40 he had mocked only minutes earlier. For the first time, he lifted the rifle with both hands, carefully, as though the warn would have become heavier. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "I believe I owe you an apology." Walt studied the target, still bending inside the heat. "You owe your people a better lesson." The black command vehicle stopped beside the range shelter, and Colonel James Holloway stepped out before the dust had settled. He was 62, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and still carried the disciplined posture of a man who had spent most of his life being watched. Sergeant Major Thomas Reed followed him, holding a tablet filled with the first reports from range control. Holloway did not begin with Ryan. He looked past the monitors, past the waiting Marines, and directly at Walt. For one long second, the colonel seemed to forget the heat, the siren, and every person standing around him. His eyes dropped to the old M40 in Ryan's hands. "Walter Mercer," he said quietly. The name changed the air. Ryan looked from the colonel to Walt. Noah lowered his gaze, already understanding what the others did not. Holloway walked toward the inspection table and stopped several feet from the old veteran. "I was told there was a range violation involving a civilian." Ryan stepped forward. "Sir, Mr. Mercer entered the firing area with an unapproved rifle. I removed the weapon and restricted him from the line. During the evaluation, he reported movement beyond the target berm. Lance Corporal Bennett activated the emergency ceasefire before I confirmed the hazard." Holloway looked toward the white maintenance truck now parked safely near the control building. "Who saw the crew first?" Ryan hesitated. The answer seemed to resist him. "Mr. Mercer, sir." "And who stopped the line?" "Lance Corporal Bennett." Holloway turned to Noah. "You acted on what you observed?" "Yes, sir." "Mr. Mercer identified the vehicle, and then I saw part of it through the mirage." "Good." The single word carried no excitement, but Noah's shoulders released slightly. Holloway faced Ryan again. "A ceasefire exists for the moment when certainty fails. It is not a decoration for perfect information." Ryan absorbed the correction without reply. Holloway then reached toward the rifle but stopped before touching it. His expression changed when he saw the scorched wood and the faded carving beneath it. "The eye lies. My brother wrote those words," he said. The Marines nearest the table became still. Walt nodded once. "Daniel carved them after we cleared the valley." Holloway's voice lowered. "He wrote about you in his last letter home. He said there was one man on that hillside who could read heat like other men read a map." Walt looked toward the distant target. "Daniel gave too much credit. He gave very little. That was how I knew he meant every word." Holloway turned to the assembled range team. "Walter Mercer served under the call sign Stillwater. He trained marksmen before most of your instructors were born. The rifle Captain Cole is holding was carried through conditions our current equipment is designed to imitate." No one laughed now. Ryan looked down at the M40, then walked to Walt and offered it back with both hands. "Sir," he said, "I judged the rifle before I understood the man carrying it." Walt accepted the weapon but did not lift it. "You judged the air too quickly as well." Ryan nodded. There was no defense left in him. "Then teach us what we missed." Walt looked toward the heat-shaken silhouette nearly a mile away. "Clear the cameras," he said. "Leave the weather stations running, but stop letting them make the decision. Bring every shooter to the line. Nobody fires until they can tell me where the target truly is." Sergeant Morris shut down the target camera feed, and the main monitor went black. Without the digital image, the valley seemed farther away. The steel silhouette nearly a mile downrange no longer appeared as a clean shape on a screen. It became a wavering mark suspended in pale air, visible one moment and broken apart the next. Walt carried the M40 to the firing line and placed it gently on a sandbag rest. He did not lie behind it. Not yet. Instead, he motioned for the 6 shooters to stand beside him. Ryan joined them without being asked. Colonel Holloway and Sergeant Major Reed remained several steps back, silent observers beneath the hard afternoon sun. "Tell me what you see," Walt said. The first Marine raised his spotting scope. Target at 1160 yards. Wind from the west at approximately 8 miles per hour. Walt looked at the next shooter. "Same distance," she said. "The mirage is moving left to right." Noah studied the valley with his scope set to lower magnification. "The mirage changes direction near the wash," he said. "It runs right near us, then almost straight up past the rocks." Walt nodded. "Better. What else?" No one answered. Walt pointed toward a strip of silver grass halfway downrange. "That grass is leaning east. Now watch the dust 50 yards beyond it." A thin ribbon of dust moved west along the dry wash. Ryan noticed the contradiction. 2 opposing currents. "Free," Walt said. He directed their attention toward the shadowed cut below the final ridge. A hawk entered the air above it, dropped several feet, then rose again. "Cool. Air is sinking through that gap. The bullet crosses warm air, side wind, then a downward current before it reaches the steel." Ryan checked the weather displays. None showed the complete pattern. Each sensor was accurate only where it stood. "The instruments were not wrong," he said. "No," Walt replied. "We were wrong to ask one instrument for the whole truth." He took a folded white cloth from his jacket and tied it loosely to a short stake beside the line. The fabric lifted west while the nearest range flag snapped east. The Marines watched the opposing motions with new attention. Walt then pointed toward the target. "Now look at the bottom edge. Do not look at the center." Through the scopes, the silhouette seemed to float above the earth. Its base bent, separated, and shifted right. Noah slowly adjusted his focus. A second dark line appeared to the left, faint but steady. "The target image is displaced," he said. "The real plate is left of what we are seeing." Walt nodded. "By how much?" The shooters began comparing the fixed burn, the shadow beneath the frame, and the movement of the mirage. Estimates came quietly at first, then with growing confidence. Ryan studied the scene for nearly a minute. "About 18 inches left at the current angle," he said. Walt looked at him. 17. Ryan accepted the correction without pride or embarrassment. Walt finally lowered himself behind the M40. His movements were slow but exact. He settled the stock against his shoulder and placed his cheek beside the scorched mark. The old scope offered no glowing numbers, only glass, crosshairs, and the restless valley beyond. He adjusted the elevation, then moved the windage by a fraction. "Why not fire now?" one Marine asked. Walt watched the heat roll across the target. "Because the air is still arguing." Silence returned. Seconds passed. Sweat gathered beneath helmets. The cloth beside Walt pulled east, relaxed, then lifted straight upward. Far downrange, the silver grass stopped moving. The hawk leveled its wings over the cut. For one brief moment, the 3 layers aligned. Walt's finger rested against the trigger. "Now," he whispered. The M40 fired once, and the sound rolled across Black Ridge with a deep, clean crack. Walt remained perfectly still behind the rifle. He did not lift his head. He did not search the faces around him for approval. The bullet was already gone, carrying every judgment made that morning through 3 layers of restless air. Noah watched through the spotting scope. For a moment, the steel silhouette seemed to slide sideways again, its black shape bending in the heat. Nothing moved on its surface. No mark appeared. Ryan held his breath. 1 second passed. Then another. Far across the valley, a sharp metallic ring rose from the target line and returned as a fading echo. The shooters looked toward one another, uncertain whether they had heard what they hoped to hear. Sergeant Morris restored the camera feed. The monitor flickered, filled with static, and then revealed the steel plate. A fresh mark sat almost exactly at its center, 17 inches left of the false image they had followed all morning. No one spoke. The wind tugged at the range flags. The white cloth beside Walt turned slowly east. He opened the bolt, cleared the rifle, and placed it safely on the rest. Only then did he sit upright. Ryan moved to the monitor and enlarged the image. The evidence remained simple and undeniable. One shot. One mark. No correction round. No digital solution. He looked back at the old rifle, then at Walt. "You waited for the currents to align," he said. Walt brushed a trace of dust from the stock. "I waited for them to stop disagreeing." Colonel Holloway stepped closer. Pride showed in his face, but so did something quieter, a memory belonging to a brother who had once watched the same man read an impossible valley. "Daniel used to say you could see patience," Holloway said. Walt shook his head. "Patience is what you do when seeing is not enough." Ryan removed his cap. The gesture was small, but every Marine noticed it. He walked to Walt and stood at attention. "Mr. Mercer, I mocked your rifle. I dismissed your warning. I nearly taught this team that confidence matters more than observation." Walt met his eyes. "Confidence is useful, Captain. Just do not let it stand where curiosity should be." Ryan nodded. Then he raised his hand in a formal salute. It was not ordered by Colonel Holloway. It was not performed for the team. It came from a man recognizing the distance between authority and wisdom. Walt returned the salute slowly. Around them, the other Marines stood straighter. Noah looked toward the target, but the heat had already swallowed it again. The black silhouette stretched, faded, and disappeared inside the glare. This time, no one reached for a screen. The shooters studied the grass, the dust, the shadows, and the wings of the hawk crossing the final ridge. Walt lifted the M40 and offered it to Ryan. The captain received it with both hands. "Do not teach them to trust the rifle," Walt said. "Teach them to notice what the rifle cannot." Ryan looked down at the scorched stock and the faded words carved beneath it. "The eye lies." When he looked up again, Walt was already walking away from the firing line, leaving the younger men to watch the air. Experience was not simply the memory of what had happened before. It was the discipline to notice what everyone else had overlooked.